All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations for Murox ASP.NET 4.6 with C# 2015, 6th edition. We are up to Chapter 22 of 25. This is a short chapter that begins on page 785 and describes how to deploy ASP.NET web applications. Now, there are different ways that you can deploy, but one of the easiest ways, and probably the easiest way, is through a feature that Visual Studio provides that's called One-Click Publish that allows you to deploy your web app. In this chapter, we learn the basics of using One-Click Publish, including how to use the Publish web wizard to create publish profiles and how to set file options. Next, we learn two specific methods for publishing a web application, those being the file system method and the web deploy method. So our applied objective is to deploy an application using one-click publish. Our knowledge objectives describe the four methods for publishing an ASP.NET application using one-click publish. In general terms, describe how you publish an application using the file system method, and in general terms, describe how you publish an application using the web deploy method. So, deployment here refers to the process of copying an ASP.NET web app from your own development system, to a production server where it can be accessed by users via some kind of a URL. An application can also be deployed to a test server so it can be tested in a different environment before it goes live. In fact, sometimes those are one and the same, where you bring it out to your actual production server where somebody actually adds like a test folder in there that only certain people can access. So Visual Studio provides a one-click publish feature for deploying or publishing a web app. This one-click publishing feature lets you publish to various targets, such as a hosting provider, Microsoft Azure, which is, I think, out to the cloud, or the local file system. It provides four methods for publishing to these targets, which we'll look at in just a minute. To start any of the four methods, you start by displaying the Publish Web Wizard, and that's what you see in the figure here. That's the Publish Web Wizard dialog box, which has four different tabs: Profile, Connection, Settings, and Preview. We'll talk about how to use these tabs as we progress through the chapter. Some of the tabs of the Publish Web Wizard look different depending on which publish method is chosen. In addition, you don't need all the tabs for every method. In the next two topics, we'll learn how to use the Profile and Settings tabs. Another important thing to know is that the information that's presented here covers only basic deployment scenarios. There might be more customization that the company that you work at wants to or needs to use. So here's the two ways that you can start the Publish Web Wizard. You can select the project in your Solution Explorer, and once you select the project, I believe you right mouse click and choose, or you can click on it and choose Build, Publish, followed by the project name command. Or you can right click on the Solution Explorer, and that's the right click one, and select Publish from the shortcut menu that's displayed. So these four methods are shown here, and this is the same table that's shown near the bottom of page 787. File system deploys files to a folder on the local system so you can use your own file transfer protocol tool to copy them to the server. FTP uses the file transfer protocol to deploy files to the target server over a network. Web deploy is similar to FTP, but has additional functionality like only copying files that have changed so that the timestamp's different, deploying databases and changing settings, and web deploy package, which creates and deploys a zip file that contains the files for the web apps that can later be installed on a target server. All right, so remember that when the app is complete, you need to deploy it to the server where it will be accessed by users. We do that through this one-click publish feature, and again, that's the way that's used in the chapter. They also mention, it's too long a URL to read out, but on the bottom of page 787, there is an overview of web deployment on Visual Studio. So if you go out to msdn.microsoft.com, which is the Microsoft Developer Network, you can search for web deployment with Visual Studio. All right. The next thing that's discussed on pages 788 and 789 is how to work with published profiles. And you can see the profile tab there, which is the first one of the Publish Web dialog box. So to create a published profile, as mentioned on 788, okay, you use the Profile tab. One way to create such a profile is to click on the Custom option in the Select the Publish tab. Okay, and if you do that, the new Custom Profile dialog box is going to be displayed as you see in here. To create a profile, you simply enter a name and click the OK button. If you've already created one profile or maybe several profiles, the drop-down list and the Manage Profiles become available. In this figure, the drop-down list shows a profile that's called CH10 Cart File System, and it has the new Custom Profile option used so you can display this dialog box here. You can also create a profile by importing a .publish settings file. This is a technique you'll often use when you use a hosting provider or Microsoft Azure, and it can simplify the process of creating a publish profile. If you want to edit an existing profile, you select it from the drop-down list. Next, the next option that they talk about here is the how to set the file publish options. So the setting tab that you see highlighted in blue here on the side of the slide lets you use options related to the files that are published to the target server. In this figure that's on page 791 in your book, you can see the options in the File Publish Options section of the tab. When you create a new profile, none of these options will be selected by default. The first option, the first checkbox that you see right here, is delete all existing files prior to publish. That lets you remove all the files for the app that were previously deployed to the server. That way, if some files were removed from the app, they will no longer be included on the server. Be aware of two things related to this. First, it isn't available when you use the web deploy publish method. Second, it can have unexpected results in some situations. So be cautious about using that option. And notice, I believe that by default it's not checked. When you publish a web application, all of the C# code behind files, designer files, and class files are compiled to a single assembly. The configure link of the pre-compiled during publishing option also becomes available if you select that particular option. If you click the link, the advanced precompile options dialog that's shown here is what's going to be displayed. This allows you to set additional options related to the precompiled development. If you don't want the ASPX code to be modifiable after it's deployed, you can remove the check mark that's right there. The last public option that's shown here is exclude files from the app app data folder, and that determines whether the files in the app data folder are deployed. And app data, I believe, is the folder that holds your databases. Now, the rest of the chapter, the next 2 pages, describe how to use the file system method, and the 2 pages after that show how to use the web deployment method. And then the chapter ends by talking about database options for a couple pages, all right, and how to see your final published product. So, as far as using the file system method, it's the simplest publish method. You might choose this method when you want to pre-compile an application in a staging area, then use your own FTP program to move it to a test server or to a production server. So you select the file system option, which is the one, as you can see, that's chosen right here. You enter the path for the directory to publish it to in the target location box, and you click publish. So there will be your path, and you just click publish. If the target doesn't exist, it will be created. So here are the published folders and files when you get done with a shopping cart app doing it this way. On 794, they're saying that rather than going through and selecting file system, now we'll choose web deploy. So if you need to deploy files to a server instead of to the local file system, you can use FTP, web deploy, or web deploy package methods. This shows the use of the web deploy method. So as you see in the dialog that's shown here as part of figure 22-5 on page 795, this shows the connection tab of the Publish Web dialog box when we select the web deploy publish method. On the tab, you start by entering the name of the server, all right, where this will be deployed. If you want it to be deployed to the IIS server on the local computer, you enter localhost. For the site name, you enter the name of the IIS website or the path to the IIS application and the name of the application. In IIS, a website is simply a container for one or more applications. If the username and password are going to be required, you can set those up as well. In addition, if you want to, you can display the application in the default browser after it's deployed. Okay. Now, there's also database options that you have to be cognizant of, and those are discussed on pages 796 and 797 with the database options in the settings tab of the Publish Web dialog box shown on your screen here, and also figure 22.6 on page 797. So remember, we saw this earlier in the setting tabs of the Publish Web dialog box. It allows you to set options related to the files that are published. When you use the web deploy method, it also lets you set the options related to databases that are used. These options are shown here. If the app uses a database and the information for connecting to that database will change when the app is deployed, you can enter the new connection string in the combo box that's provided down here. You can also deploy the database used in an app to the specified server. To do that, you select the Update Database option as shown on the bottom of the page. This deploys the database schema. To deploy the data, you need to write an SQL script and then add that script to the dialog box that's displayed when you click this Configure Database Updates link. Finally, for previewing, and this is just about it for the chapter, for previewing the files to be published, we've got our last tab here, which is the Preview tab. Again, this allows you to display a list of the files that will be published to the target server. The list includes both new files and files that have been updated since the last deployment. and they're shown right, an example of which is shown here. If you don't want to deploy a file from the list, you can then deselect by clicking on any of the checkboxes. The IIS web server uses a virtual directory that points to the physical directory for the application. When you use the web deploy method to publish to IIS, the files for an application are published to one of these physical directories. In order to be able to do this, you need to be able to run Visual Studio as an administrator. All right, so we've finished yet another chapter, and we discussed in here the one-click publish method for deploying an ASP.NET web application. We described the 4 different methods for publishing the ASP.NET web application. All right, those being the file system, the FTP, the web deploy, and the web deploy package. In particular, we looked at over a couple pages how to deploy or publish the app using the file system method. Finally, we talked about how to publish it using the web deploy method. All right, this ends section 4 of the textbook, meaning we now go into section 5, which is the last particular section that's in the book. So next we will go over chapter 23, which I thought was in here, but I guess I don't see it. So we will next go over chapter 23, which describes how to use ASP.NET AJAX. And I'll be back with that presentation momentarily.